The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Chapter 4, The Carew Murder Case. As a reminder, at the end of Chapter 3, Mr. Utterson had gone to see Dr. Jekyll and he expressed his concerns over Dr. Jekyll's friendship with Mr. Hyde, and Dr. Jekyll told Mr. Utterson, "Don't worry about it." So now here we are in Chapter 4. Nearly a year later, so it's been a year since Mr. Utterson had that conversation with Dr. Jekyll about how he didn't think Mr. Hyde was a good friend to have. Nearly a year later, in the month of October, 1800 and something, London was startled by a crime of singular ferocity and rendered all the more notable by the high position of the victim. The details were few and startling. A maidservant living alone in a house not far from the river had gone upstairs to bed around 11 p.m. Although a fog rolled over the city in the small hours, the early part of the night was cloudless, and the lane, which the maid's window overlooked, was brilliantly lit by the full moon. So we have like this setting here, it's 11 p.m., so it's completely dark outside. We have this fog rolling across the city. There's a full moon, so you can still like see everything that's happening. It seemed she was romantically given, for she sat down upon her box, which stood immediately under the window, and fell into a dream of musing. Never, she used to say, with streaming tears when she narrated that experience, never had she felt more at peace with all men or thought more kindly of the world. And as she so sat, she became aware of an aged and beautiful gentleman with white hair, drawing near along the lane and advancing to meet him. Another and very small gentleman to whom at first she paid less attention. So this maid is in her room and she's looking out her window at the street below, and she sees these two men start to like approach each other on the street. One's walking from one direction, the other's walking from the other direction, and they're walking towards each other on the street. When they had come within speech, which was just under the maid's eyes, the older man bowed and accosted the other with a very pretty manner of politeness. It did not seem as if the subject of his address were of great importance. Indeed, from his pointing, it sometimes appeared as if he were only inquiring his way. But the moon shone on his face as he spoke, and the girl was pleased to watch it. It seemed to breathe such an innocent and old-world kindness of disposition, yet with something high, too, as of a well-founded self-content. Presently her eye wandered to the other, and she was surprised to recognize in him a certain Mr. Hyde, who had once visited her master and for whom she had conceived a dislike. So there's these two gentlemen that walk like towards each other on the street. And the older gentleman, he looks very distinguished. He pauses, he kind of like greets the guy, like says hello as you would, like if you're the only two people in a hallway or on a street. It's kind of like awkward if you don't make eye contact. So this older gentleman's like says hello or something along those lines. She doesn't recognize him, but she does recognize the guy that he says hello to as Mr. Hyde, because he had like some business with her employer in the past, and she remembers not liking him. He had in his hand a heavy cane with which he was trifling, but he answered never a word and seemed to listen with an ill-contained impatience. And then all of a sudden he broke out in a great flame of anger, stamping with his foot, brandishing the cane and carrying on, as the maid described it, like a madman. The old gentleman took a step back, with the air of one very much surprised and a trifle hurt. And at that Mr. Hyde broke out of all bounds and clubbed him to the earth. And the next moment, with ape-like fury, he was trampling his victim underfoot and hailing down a storm of blows, under which the bones were audibly shattered and the body jumped upon the roadway. At the horror of these sights and sounds, the maid fainted. Wow. Okay, so Mr. Hyde here is really escalated. This older gentleman like gives him a greeting on the street, and Mr. Hyde doesn't give him a greeting. Okay, it says instead it just makes him angry, and she sees like this anger come over Mr. Hyde's face, and it says he takes this walking cane because this is the Victorian England, and so people had like these walking canes that they went around with. He takes the cane that he's carrying and he starts like wailing on this older gentleman with it. And it says that he had like this ape-like fury. So again, we have these animalistic descriptions of Mr. Hyde. And not only does he beat the older gentleman with the cane, but it says once the older gentleman went down to the ground because he was injured, it says Mr. Hyde was trampling his victim underfoot and then still continuing to beat him with the cane to where you could hear the bones breaking. And because he's using such force on the body is moving on the ground because of that. So this is like a horrific attack that Mr. Hyde has done on this poor older gentleman. And it's so horrific, in fact, that the maid faints. It was 2 o'clock when she came to herself and called for the police. The murderer was gone long ago, but there lay his victim in the middle of the lane, incredibly mangled. So he doesn't just beat this guy, he beats him to death. The stick with which the deed had been done, although it was of some rare and very tough and heavy wood, had broken in the middle under the stress of this insane cruelty, and one splintered half had rolled in the neighboring gutter. The other, without doubt, had been carried away by the murderer. So he beat this older gentleman so thoroughly that the cane broke in half, and half of it remained at the crime scene, and they're guessing that he took the other half with him. A purse and a gold watch were found upon the victim, but no cards or papers except a sealed and stamped envelope, which he had been probably carrying to the post, and which bore the name and address of Mr. Utterson. So they search the dead man's body and they find this letter addressed to Mr. Utterson. And then they also find a purse, like a wallet, and a gold watch. So this crime that takes place, Mr. Hyde did not kill this guy because he wanted his money or anything like that. He killed him because he got angry. This was brought to the lawyer the next morning before he was out of bed, and he had no sooner seen it and been told the circumstances than he shot out a solemn lip. "I shall say nothing till I've seen the body," said he. "This may be very serious. Have the kindness to wait while I dress." And with the same grave countenance, he hurried through his breakfast and drove to the police station, whither the body had been carried. As soon as he came into the cell, he nodded. "Yes," said he, "I recognize him. I am sorry to say this is Sir Danvers Carew." "Good God, sir!" exclaimed the officer. "Is it possible?" And the next moment his eye lighted up with a professional ambition. "This will make a deal of noise," he said, "and perhaps you can help us to the man." And he briefly narrated what the maid had seen and showed the broken stick. So we find out the name of the murder victim, which was Sir Danvers Carew. Mr. Utterson had already quailed at the name of Hyde, but when the stick was laid before him, he could doubt no longer. Broken and battered as it was, he recognized it for one that he had himself presented many years before to Henry Jekyll. So when Mr. Utterson sees the cane that Mr. Hyde used to kill Sir Danvers Carew, he recognizes it because he gave it to Dr. Jekyll as a gift many years ago. "Is this Mr. Hyde a person of small stature?" he inquired. "Particularly small and particularly wicked-looking is what the maid calls him," said the officer. Mr. Utterson reflected, and then, raising his head, "If you will come with me in my cab," he said, "I think I can take you to his house." It was by this time about 9 in the morning, and the first fog of the season. A great chocolate-colored pall lowered over the heaven, but the wind was continually charging and routing these embattled vapors, so that as the cab crawled from street to street, Mr. Utterson beheld a marvelous number of degrees and hues of twilight. For here it would be dark like the back end of the evening, and there would be a glow of rich, lurid brown like the light of some strange conflagration. And here for a moment the fog would be quite broken up, and a haggard shaft of daylight would glance in between the swirling reefs. So what we have to remember here is this is London during Victorian England, and there was a lot of pollution during that time. So even though it is morning time, there's this smoggy pollution that's kind of choking the air a bit. The dismal quarter of Soho, seen under these changing glimpses, with its muddy ways and slatternly passengers, and its lamps, which had never been extinguished or had been kindled afresh to combat this mournful reinvasion of darkness, seemed, in the lawyer's eyes, like a district of some city in a nightmare. The thoughts of his mind, besides, were of the gloomiest dye, and when he glanced at the companion of his drive, he was conscious of some touch of that terror of the law and the law's officers, which may at times assail the most honest. As the cab drew up before the address indicated, the fog lifted a little and showed him a dingy street, a gin palace, a low French eating house, a shop for the retail of penny numbers and two-penny salads, many ragged children huddled in the doorways, and many women of many different nationalities passing out, key in hand, to have a morning glass. And the next moment the fog settled down again upon that part, as brown as umber, and cut him off from his blackguardly surroundings. This was the home of Henry Jekyll's favorite, of a man who was an heir to £250,000. So he makes his way with the police to Mr. Hyde's address. And we have like this description there of what it looks like. And it's not a great place. It's kind of like run down. You have these like kind of like drunkards and interesting women in the streets. So it's not somewhere where a person of repute who cares about their reputation would live. And it also, in that last paragraph, or that last sentence, that paragraph says that Mr. Hyde was a man who was heir to £250,000. Well, if we put that in terms that we would understand, in 1886, that would have amounted to 1.25 million American dollars. So this is no small fortune that Dr. Jekyll is leaving to Mr. Hyde in his will. An ivory-faced and silvery-haired old woman opened the door. She had an evil face, smoothed by hypocrisy, but her manners were excellent. Yes, she said, this was Mr. Hyde's, but he was not at home. He had been in that night very late, but had gone away again in less than an hour. There was nothing strange in that. His habits were very irregular, and he was often absent. For instance, it was nearly 2 months since she had seen him, till yesterday. Very well, then, we wish to see his rooms, said the lawyer, and when the woman began to declare it was impossible, I'd better tell you who this person is, he added. This is Inspector Newcomen of Scotland Yard. So he brings this guy named Inspector Newcomen of Scotland Yard, which was their police force in London, to Mr. Hyde's address to question him, but Mr. Hyde is not there, and so they're going to go in and search the premises. A flash of odious joy appeared upon the woman's face. Ah, she said, he is in trouble. What has he done? Mr. Utterson and the inspector exchanged glances. He doesn't seem a very popular character, observed the latter. And now, my good woman, just let me and this gentleman have us a look about. In the whole extent of the house, which but for the old woman remained otherwise empty, Mr. Hyde had only used a couple of rooms, but these were furnished with luxury and good taste. A closet was filled with wine, the plate was of silver, the napery of elegant, a good picture hung upon the walls, a gift, as Utterson supposed, from Henry Jekyll, who was much of a connoisseur, and the carpets were of many plies and agreeable in color. At this moment, however, the rooms bore every mark of having been recently and hurriedly ransacked. Clothes lay about the floor, with their pockets inside out. Lock-fast drawers stood open, and on the hearth there lay a pile of grey ashes, as though many papers had been burned. From these embers the inspector disinterred the butt end of a green cheque-book, which had resisted the action of the fire. The other half of the stick was found behind the door. And as this clinched his suspicions, the officer declared himself delighted. A visit to the bank, where several £1,000s were found to be lying to the murderer's credit, completed his gratification. They searched Mr. Hyde's quarters, and it looks like it's been completely ransacked. Like someone went through everything like very quickly there. There's like a checkbook from a bank that's like burned in the fireplace area, and they also find the other part of the murder weapon, the walking stick, in Mr. Hyde's place as well. You may depend upon it, sir, he told Mr. Utterson. I have him in my hand. He must have lost his head, or he never would have left the stick, or, above all, burned the checkbook. Why, money's life to the man. We have nothing to do but wait for him at the bank, and get out the handbills. This last, however, was not so easy of an accomplishment, for Mr. Hyde had numbered few familiars. Even the master of the servant-maid had only seen him twice. His family could nowhere be traced. He had never been photographed, and the few who could describe him differed widely, as common observers will. Only on one point were they agreed, that it was the haunting sense of unexpressed deformity with which the fugitive impressed his beholders. So we don't get much more of a description of Mr. Hyde in this chapter, besides the fact that obviously is an anger issue, because at the beginning of the book, he had run over that little girl, and now here he has killed Sir Danvers Carew. Besides that, he doesn't have very many acquaintances, and the only way people really describe him is what we've already heard, with like a sense of deformity. But he has escalated here because, as far as we know, this is the first time that Mr. Hyde has committed a murder. And so Mr. Utterson still, like, this is just adding to the list of problems that he has with Dr. Jekyll's association with Mr. Hyde.